All right, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the world of Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher who really wasn't afraid to shake things up.
We got a fascinating biography here and a deep dive into his key ideas from a philosophy journal.
So get ready, because this is Nietzsche, unfiltered. Now, before we attempt to understand his philosophy, don't you think it's important we understand the man himself?
Absolutely. To fully grasp the weight of his ideas, you need to understand the context from which they arose.
Okay, so Nietzsche in a nutshell. Who was he?
Nietzsche was born in 1844 in Prussia, now Germany.
His father, a Lutheran pastor, passed away when Nietzsche was just a young boy.
This event, I think, was a turning point in his life, planting the seeds of his evolving perspective on religion.
A tragic beginning. It does make you wonder about the impact of those formative years. So, with his father gone, what happened next?
His family relocated to Nuremberg, and he was raised by the strong women in his life, his mother, grandmother, and aunts. Even early on, Nietzsche was a brilliant student.
He pursued classical philology, the study of language and literature at the University of Leipzig, and incredibly became a professor at the University of Basel at just 24.
Wow, 24. To become a professor at that age, he must have been something truly special. It's not every day you meet a philosophical prodigy.
But didn't he have to leave academia due to health issues?
You're right. Sadly, he suffered from chronic migraines and debilitating vision problems, forcing him to retire from teaching in 1879. This, however, marked a pivotal point in his life.
Relieved from the confines of academia, he began to travel, write, and fully immerse himself in his philosophical pursuits.
Almost like being forced away from the conventional path, allowed his most authentic self to emerge.
It's during this time that he wrote some of his most influential works, right?
Exactly. The 1880s was a tremendously creative period for him. It's when he penned groundbreaking works like Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Beyond Good and Evil, and The Genealogy of Morals, books that challenged conventions and really shook the foundation of traditional philosophical thought. Sadly, his time was cut short. At 44, Nietzsche suffered a mental breakdown believed to be a result of syphilis, leading to his tragic decline.
What a tragic end for such a brilliant mind. It seems like his life was marked by both incredible highs and devastating lows. Okay, so we've talked about Nietzsche the man, now onto his ideas. He's probably most famous or infamous for his proclamation, God is dead, right?
That's a pretty bold statement.
It is, and it's often misinterpreted. He wasn't suggesting a literal death.
It was a metaphorical declaration, a way of expressing the declining influence of traditional religion, particularly Christianity, in Europe during his time.
So more than just saying God doesn't exist, he was pointing to a shift in societal values, a decline in religious authority in the face of rising secularism and scientific thought.
Precisely. Nietzsche recognized that the foundations of faith were crumbling, and with them, the traditional moral framework upon which society rested.
To highlight this, he employs a very powerful image in The Gay Science, in a section titled The Madman. Imagine this: a man running through a crowded marketplace, desperately shouting, "God is dead! We have killed him."
He really had a flair for the dramatic, didn't he?
It does make you stop and think. What happens when the very concept we've based our lives on, our moral compass, our understanding of good and evil, is suddenly pulled out from under us?
That's a terrifying and exhilarating prospect all at the same time.
And that's the crux of Nietzsche's philosophy.
He recognized the potential for chaos and nihilism, but also saw it as an incredible opportunity for human liberation and self-discovery.
So while others saw darkness, he saw a glimmer of light, a chance maybe to forge a new path.
Exactly. And that path, according to Nietzsche, leads us to the Übermensch.
Ah, yes, the Übermensch. Now, this is where things get really interesting.
I have to admit, the first time I encountered this concept, my mind was blown.
So tell me, what did Nietzsche mean by the Übermensch? It's often translated as overman or even superman, right?
Yes, and all those translations are attempts to capture the essence of this really complex idea. The Übermensch, for Nietzsche, represents a new type of human being, someone who transcends traditional morality and societal constraints. They aren't bound by the old rules and create their own values, their own meaning, driven by their own inherent...
Will to power.
You got it, will to power. It's a concept often misunderstood and misrepresented.
Yeah, I can see how it might conjure up images of ruthless dictators or, comic book villains.
It's easy to get caught up in the word power, But for Nietzsche, it wasn't about brute force or domination over others. He saw it as something far more nuanced, a fundamental driving force within us, pushing us to grow, strive, create, and overcome challenges.
So more about self-mastery than world domination.
Absolutely. It's about harnessing your inner strength, your creativity, your potential. It's about shaping your own life, becoming the author of your own meaning in a world that no longer offers easy answers.
Okay, so it's about self-creation, self-actualization. I like that. But how does this will to power play into his critique of traditional morality, particularly what he called slave morality?
Ah, yes, slave morality. This is where Nietzsche really digs deep into the origins of our values. He argues that traditional morality, especially the kind rooted in Christianity, suppresses our will to power, encouraging us to deny our natural instincts.
And slave morality, as he saw it, promotes values like humility, self-denial, weakness, values that might sound virtuous on the surface.
Exactly. Nietzsche argued that these values stem from a place of resentment, a way for the weak to control the strong, to make power itself seem evil or undesirable. He argued it's a morality born from turning weakness into a virtue.
So instead of embracing strength, ambition, the drive to excel, slave morality flips the script and tells us those things are bad.
Precisely. It's almost as if it's saying, don't stand out, don't strive for greatness, just accept your lot in life.
Yeah.
He contrasted this with what he termed master morality.
And master morality, if I'm understanding this correctly, embraces those very qualities, strength, ambition, the drive to excel.
You've got it. It's about creating your own values, your own moral code, not based on some external authority, but on your own internal compass.
So not just blindly following what we've been told, but forging our own path, even if it goes against the grain.
Exactly. Living a life that's authentic to yourself, even if it means challenging conventional wisdom. Now, of course, this is where some of the controversy around Nietzsche arises.
Because taken out of context, it's easy to see how his ideas could be misconstrued and used to justify some not-so-great things.
Precisely. Some have interpreted his work as promoting elitism, even authoritarianism. But I think it's important to remember that Nietzsche was deeply critical of any ideology that sought to control or oppress others.
So it's less about imposing your will on others and more about mastering your own inner world, your own desires, your own potential.
Exactly. It's about individual responsibility, self-creation, and living a life of meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.
It's a challenging philosophy for sure, but also incredibly thought-provoking. Okay, so we've covered God is dead, the Übermensch, the will to power, slave morality versus master morality. Nietzsche certainly didn't shy away from tackling the big questions, but then he throws us a real curveball with the concept of eternal recurrence. Now, this one requires some serious brain power.
It certainly does. It's one of Nietzsche's most radical and challenging ideas.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't well versed in Nietzsche, break it down for us. What exactly is eternal recurrence?
Imagine this. What if time isn't linear, but cyclical? What if everything that has happened is happening and ever will happen, including your life, repeats itself over and over again for all eternity?
Okay, whoa. So not just one go at this thing called life, but an infinite loop of the same joys, the same sorrows, the same triumphs, the same failures, over and over and over again. It's kind of a terrifying thought, isn't it? To think we're destined to repeat our mistakes, our heartbreaks forever.
It's certainly a dizzying concept to consider. Now, whether Nietzsche actually believed this is how reality functions is debatable. Some scholars see it as a thought experiment, a way to push us to examine our lives from a radical new perspective.
So it's not about the literal truth of eternal recurrence, but the impact this idea has on how we live our lives right now.
Exactly. Imagine knowing that every choice you make, every action you take, will be repeated for eternity. Wouldn't it make you consider your life differently?
It would certainly add a whole new layer of consequence to even the smallest decisions. You know, I never thought of it this way, but it almost makes you ask, am I living a life I'd want to repeat, flaws and all, for all eternity?
Precisely. It challenges us to ask whether we are truly embracing our lives with all their messy complexities or simply going through the motions. It's about living authentically, even courageously, in the face of this potentially overwhelming truth.
Okay, that's a lot to process. It seems like Nietzsche had a way of pushing us to confront the big questions, the uncomfortable questions, the questions that really make us examine the very core of our being. But he didn't stop there, did he? He even challenged the very nature of truth itself. So we've got this philosopher who tells us God is dead, urges us to become Übermensch, grapple with the will to power, and then throws in eternal recurrence for good measure.
And if that wasn't enough, he turns around and questions the very idea of truth.
Is there anything left standing after a Nietzsche deep dive?
That's the beauty of Nietzsche. He doesn't offer easy answers or a prepackaged system of beliefs.
Instead, he gives us the tools and the encouragement to question everything.
Exactly.
So walk me through this. How did he approach truth?
Because if there's one thing we think philosophy should give us, it's truth with a capital T, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
But Nietzsche was skeptical of this idea of absolute objective truth. He believed that what we call truth is always shaped by our perspectives, our language, our culture, even our individual desires.
In On Truth and Lie, in an extra-moral sense, he famously said, "Truth is not something we discover, but something we create, shaped by our will to power."
It's a mouthful, but it gets to the core of his thinking.
So there's no such thing as objective reality, only different interpretations of it.
Well, that's a bit of an oversimplification, but essentially, yes. Nietzsche argued that even the language we use to describe the world influences how we perceive it.
And language itself is a human construct, constantly evolving and changing.
Exactly.
So if we're essentially creating truth as we go along, doesn't that lead to a very subjective and, dare I say, chaotic view of the world?
I mean, how do we differentiate between good truth and bad truth if it's all relative?
That's the million-dollar question, and Nietzsche doesn't let us off the hook easily. He's pushing us to acknowledge that our understanding of the world is always filtered through our own individual lenses. It's a call for intellectual honesty, for recognizing our own biases, and for engaging in a constant process of questioning and reevaluation.
You can't just assume we've got it all figured out.
So it's less about finding the truth and more about a constant striving, a constant questioning, a constant refining of our own understanding.
Exactly. It's about embracing the ambiguity, the complexity, even the discomfort that comes with living in a world without easy answers.
It's definitely not a philosophy for the faint of heart. But I can see how it paved the way for so many other movements, existentialism, postmodernism, that grappled with similar questions about the nature of reality, meaning, and human existence.
Absolutely. His influence on 20th and 21st century thought is undeniable. He questioned everything from religion and morality to truth and the very nature of human existence in ways that continue to resonate with us today.
He certainly gave us a lot to chew on. For me, the biggest takeaway is that we have more agency, more responsibility than we often realize.
If God is dead, if there are no absolute truths, then we as individuals are tasked with creating our own meaning, our own values, even our own versions of truth.
That's a powerful insight. It's both liberating and daunting, isn't it? But I think that's what makes Nietzsche such an important figure. He forces us to confront the fundamental questions of human existence and to grapple with the freedom and responsibility that comes with being alive in a world without easy answers.
It's not a comfortable philosophy, but it's a necessary one.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm walking away from this deep dive with a lot to ponder. Nietzsche is definitely not a thinker you just get on the first try. He requires rereading, reflection, and probably a good dose of caffeine.
I agree. But it's a journey worth taking, and one that offers new insights with each encounter.
You know, what strikes me, listening to all of this, is how relevant these ideas still feel today. Maybe even more so in a world grappling with rapid technological advancements, shifting social norms, and a constant barrage of information that often leaves us feeling unmoored, uncertain, and searching for something solid to hold on to.
Absolutely. Nietzsche's ideas resonate deeply with our current moment. His emphasis on individual responsibility, on questioning authority, on creating meaning in a seemingly meaningless world, all feel strikingly relevant to the challenges we face today.
It's almost as if he saw it all coming. This world on the brink of transformation, where old certainties are crumbling and we're left to navigate the unknown, armed with nothing but our own wits, our own will, and perhaps a healthy dose of Nietzschean courage.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've done a pretty good job of grappling with this philosophical giant, wouldn't you say?
We've only just scratched the surface, to be honest. But it's a start. And hopefully it sparks some curiosity in our listeners to go out and explore Nietzsche's work for themselves. Because, let's face it, a little Nietzschean questioning never hurt anyone. In fact, it might just be the thing we need to navigate the complexities of the 21st century. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the mind of Friedrich Nietzsche. Until next time, keep asking those big questions.